freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 232 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearms.com, your nationwide hometown gun shop. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. We have a great show today. The title is Facebook Bias, and we have Ryan Hartwig.
Ryan is a Facebook insider with Project Veritas. Ryan graduated from Arizona State University in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in Spanish linguistics. More recently, Ryan took a job as a content moderator for Facebook. After watching the extreme bias and censorship he witnessed on a daily basis, he made the decision to wear a hidden camera to expose what was happening within the social media giant. Holy cow. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cheryl. It's a pleasure.
My goodness. So you one day you're a college student, you're just studying, another language. The next day, that had to be a huge decision to put a hidden camera on your person to go about your workday. Like that's the stuff of, movies. Talk to us about that, like that decision-making process and that first day.
Yeah, so I started at Cognizant in March of 2018. So I was there for just under 2 years. I didn't actually put a camera on until about a year after I'd started there. I just noticed so many examples of bias and corruption. So yeah, around this, the first time I put it on, it was a little bit awkward getting used to it, the camera, and I can't go into too many specifics about the type of camera I used, but it was very, very nerve-wracking. You start to feel very paranoid. You think that everyone knows that you're wearing a camera, but it's really not very obvious. So. Yeah.
It's probably like the first time anybody out there that are concealed carry holders, or even open carry, holders, the first time you wear the gun outside of your house, you do just kind of feel like it's a big thing, and a gun is larger probably than the camera you were using.
Ryan, can I ask him? So, yeah. Ryan, did anybody else know at the company that what you were doing?
So Dan, no, nobody else knew at the company. It was something that was very, I had to keep under wraps. I was working with some individuals from Project Veritas, so I would, report to them and stay in communication with them, and they supplied the camera. But yeah, nobody else knew at work.
Yeah, that'd be a very scary situation.
It would. And so you must have maybe reached out to Project Veritas, or did they somehow already know you and ask you to do this?
Yeah. So in May of 2019, after being there for about a year, I documented about 19 examples of bias that I'd witnessed. And so I wrote a letter to some local politicians, a couple of congressmen, senators, and I didn't hear back. And so that's when I reached out to Project Veritas. I think I emailed them. So that's how I reached out to them. So I didn't have any prior relationship with Project Veritas prior to this.
So if you don't mind if I ask early in the game here, so could you give me some examples of what was kind of frustrating you and made you do the videos?
Yeah. One example that I saw in the summer of 2018 was there was a viral video on social media showing a Trump supporter getting attacked. So a young kid in a restaurant was wearing a Trump hat, and he got attacked by an adult. His hat got knocked off. And so Facebook saw this video and knew that it was viral, and they told us to delete all instances of the video. And the reason they said to delete it was because the adult was cursing at the minor in the video. So there was maybe a very minor policy violation, but that cursing wasn't, it's not like I'm sharing a video, cursing at you directly, you Cheryl or Dan. So they made that decision. They made a decision to delete that. And then a quick counterexample is a far-right senator in Australia named Fraser Anning was giving a speech, and a kid, once again a minor, walked up and cracked an egg on the back of his head. And so the senator turned around and slapped the kid in the head a couple of times. And that actually violates our child abuse policy. So if you're slapping a kid repeatedly, that violates child abuse. So it should have been deleted. And Facebook knew that it violated their policy, but they said, we're making a newsworthy exception, and we're going to allow this child abuse on the platform because, it showed a right-wing senator initially being humiliated. So that's what they would love to do, is they would love to make newsworthy exceptions and allow certain things.
Newsworthy means anything they want to say then, right? Anything.
Yeah,
It's a very
broad
category. Yeah.
So I want to if I want.
Well, and if it shows conservative people, right-leaning people in bad behavior, then let's be sure that stays up. But if it shows left-leaning people doing bad behavior, well, maybe let's pull that down, right?
Yeah, and another great example is the words we call each other online. So if I call you something directly, if I say, Dan, you're a snowflake, or if I say, Dan, you're a Trump humper, if I'm attacking you, and you directly report that, one of those gets taken down, one stays up. I'll let you decide. So if I call you a snowflake and you report it, it gets taken down. But if I call you a Trump humper, that stays up.
Mm-hmm.
And how frustrating that job must have been for you.
Yeah, it was pretty frustrating, and it reached that point, that boiling point, where it's kind of like death by a million paper cuts, where you just see so many examples of it, and that's what really pushed me over the edge and had me reach out to Project Veritas. Yeah, very frustrating.
Do you think this is all overseen by Mark Zuckerberg?
And that's really fascinating, and that's something I wanted to touch on because in April of 2018, so a month after I started there, we had the testimony from Mark Zuckerberg in Congress, where he testified that Facebook does not censor political speech, and I witnessed the contrary over a period of 2 years. So I don't know if he's directly involved. It's possible he doesn't know, but it's his responsibility as CEO to know what's going on. So,
as far as blocking speech, that you would think. And so, as these things were all coinciding, because Mark Zuckerberg did testify in front of Congress in April of 2018. Were you already doing work with Project Veritas by that time, or did you see Mark Zuckerberg speak and you thought, no, this is, not what's happening in real life, and now I want to do something about it?
So at that point, I was not working with Project Veritas, and I just started, so I hadn't seen as many examples of bias. But a year after that is when I documented enough examples where I felt like I should reach out to someone or, blow the whistle. And so, even in my training, in the first month of training in March of 2018, one of my trainers was very, very openly political, and she bragged about and talked about how Obama was her patronus charm, was her hero, basically. And it's one of my coworkers had like President Obama as his profile picture. And so people were very openly, liberal in their views.
Yeah, but you weren't allowed to be openly conservative in yours, apparently. You mentioned off air that you actually got in a little bit of trouble with HR one time for attending a particular rally, or for what happened because you attended.
And that's something we really wanted to touch on. So thank you for asking that. So I got in trouble, and this is in the video that was released about 3 weeks ago from Project Veritas, and we documented this. So I was wearing a hidden camera while I talked to HR, while I got in trouble from HR. So in 2015, to give you context, this was 4 months after the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attacks in Paris. And so, and this was a month after some individuals from Phoenix traveled to Texas to try to assassinate Pamela Geller, other artists who were drawing pictures of Muhammad. So there was a freedom of speech rally organized in May of 2015, which I attended. And it was a peaceful, protest, and I was open to carrying at that event. And it was very peaceful until the counter protesters showed up, and there were cops there. And so at work, we have a wide-ranging conversation. We talk about lots of crazy things. We see nudity on a daily basis, beheadings, just you name it, we see it. So as you can imagine, you develop a pretty strong bond with your coworkers where you can talk about pretty much anything very openly. And so I believe we were talking about religion, and this was in early January of this year. And I shared a link to this protest. Well, I ended up on the cover of LA Times. I ended up on the cover of LA Times holding a sign with cartoons from Charlie Hebdo. So I was holding cartoons drawn by the people who were murdered by terrorists 4 months prior. Mm-hmm. And that's all I was doing in the image. And you didn't even see my gun actually in the photo from LA Times. So I shared the link. That's all I shared, the link to the LA Times article. And 3 weeks later, my coworker raised it to HR. And I got in trouble for sharing that link.
So much for the camaraderie and we're close because we work together angle, huh? What do you think his motivation was with that?
Yeah, so my coworker who reported me, he actually, coincidentally enough, he attended that same protest in 2015, 5 years prior, but he was a counter protester. So it seems like he had a personal axe to grind with me, but he raised it up all the way to HR compliance. Mm-hmm. So when I met with local HR 3 weeks later, they said what you shared was advocating for violence and discriminatory in nature. So I pushed back on that, and they finally backpedaled. So you'll see 2 interviews in the video with HR. And in the second one, they backpedal and they say, well, you still violated our policy because you shared a personal link using Facebook's chat system. And so, that it just clearly shows, like, once again, the bias against conservatives if you have at Facebook.
Mm-hmm. So Ryan, as a what do they call it, moderator for Facebook?
Yeah.
Did they have a list for you, a written list of things to watch for, or were you allowed to just make decisions on your own? Oh, that's no good. This is no good.
The decisions, they had a very, very extensive and well written policy. So I would compare it to, it was very, very wordy. It was like legalese. I would compare it to even the Arizona Revised Statutes.
Wow.
You almost have to be a paralegal to interpret some of the wording. And so something I want to touch on briefly is, for example, the firearms policy. I'm sure you've had the problem of getting deleted on Facebook for trying to sell some ammunition, things like that. And even me, after studying it for 2 years, this written policy, I had difficulty interpreting it, knowing if something would apply. So for the average person to know, this could be for anything, not only firearms, but for hate speech, to know if it's going to get taken down or not, is a very difficult decision, because even I had an issue interpreting the policy.
So when you shared that link with your friend that ended up getting you in trouble with HR, well, not your friend, obviously, he wasn't your friend, your coworker, at that time, were you thinking, oh, he's going to be like, oh, that's an interesting thing you did? Or like, what were you thinking was going to happen when you shared that with him?
Yeah, I mean, I shared it with a couple of people at work, and some were fine with it. I shared it with a friend of mine, a coworker who's actually Muslim, and he was fine with it, and I talked to him about it. So the individual who was not Muslim became offended by it. But initially, right after I shared the article, I did notice that he chose to sit in a different area than me. So we didn't talk about it. He didn't talk to me about it directly. But yeah, you're talking to someone who I've taken Arabic 101 in college. I've been to the mosque in Tempe. I have a lot of friends who who are from the Middle East. And so I know a few words in Arabic. So you're talking to the least racist person imaginable, someone who's like, who understands, hey, there's a difference between like Islam and radical Islamic extremism. So yeah, I don't know what his perception was based on the LA Times article and how it portrayed me. But yeah, I'm the least racist person you'll ever meet.
And so with your previous interactions with him, you didn't have any way of knowing this was going to use an overused word, trigger him. And even if it did trigger him, you would think that your coworker would just say, hey, Ryan, I don't know, this isn't kind of my thing, but it's neat that you were in LA Times, but this isn't my thing. So in the future, I mean, that is a way that human beings at least used to interact with one another. So it's reasonable that you might have thought that would be how it played out.
Yeah, the video is a little bit choppy right now, but yeah, there was no indication from him, no conversation afterwards. I had a lot of open conversations with other coworkers who had differing opinions. But yeah, it was a surprise to me. It was a shock when 3 weeks later I got called into HR and they asked me about it. So yeah, it was quite the experience, because I got a written warning. They never retracted the written warning. They changed the wording on it, but I was punished at work because I literally shared a link of me exercising my First Amendment. And that's something that I highlighted to them. And what's crazy, Cheryl, is I actually emailed like a bunch of people in the legal department. I went to the address book and just found anybody who in the legal department or even PR. I emailed someone in public relations, like in corporate. And it's funny and it's ironic because if they would have hopped on that and maybe reversed it, then this wouldn't have been as big of a story. But here we are 3 months later, half a year later, and Cognizant's image is suffering because they didn't take a hint.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ryan, the way I look at it is the way Facebook is, they probably rewarded him in some way. They probably reward snitches.
Well, that's kind of a thing now with COVID, right? As we sit in the studio on Monday, July 20th of 2020, and it is still full-blown COVID season. And there are, there's mayors, there's governors who are encouraging people, snitches get rewards. And that's about people, wearing masks or not wearing masks. So I'm sure that people sharing opinions, right? Unpopular opinions. I don't know that would be too far-fetched to think. I want to talk about the phrase hate speech. You think that is a subjective term? And do you think that our founding fathers, when they sat down and they wrote up this document, this super thick document we call our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, that takes all of a whole hour to read, do you think when they wrote the First Amendment, right, the freedom of speech, do you think they'd ever heard of hate speech and they had already considered that when they said out on paper that all speech is protected? What do you think about all that?
Right, that's a really good question. I mean, hate speech is. Let me just check something real quick here because my connection is a little bit different. Okay, I think that might help my connection. So yeah, hate speech. I mean, this is something that's so broad. I mean, when Zuckerberg testified and he said that they don't censor political speech, well, but they have a very ample hate speech policy that includes political speech. So I have some great examples here. So if I tell you, keep Canadians out of the United States, technically that violates their hate speech policy under exclusion because you're, excluding Canadians from a process. So hate speech protects, people based on their, according to their policy, protects people based on their race, gender, nationality, ethnicity. But once again, they make exclusions all the time. So hate speech it's such a loaded word. I really don't think the founders intended to protect, to have that kind of wording or definition of hate speech. So I want to give a great example of what Facebook did. And once again, they gave another exception. So this deals with Alabama's abortion law. So a couple years ago, there was a bunch of celebrities were pushing against Alabama's more strict abortion law. And so Alyssa Milano, for example, she would post and say, men shouldn't be allowed to make laws about women's bodies. All right. So that phrase in and of itself violates Facebook's hate speech policy, right?
Because it excludes men from something.
Yeah, excludes men from participating in political in the political debate, in the political forum. So Facebook made an exception, and they said, hey, we're going to allow this statement because it's, once again, going back to it, Dan, trending and newsworthy. So it's one of those things where it's completely arbitrary. They made an exception to it. But yeah, hate speech it's so broad. It covers so many different things. It's quite incredible how much Facebook controls.
So if I said, are we going to have steak for dinner? Look at the steak that we're having for dinner tonight. That could be hate speech because the people in India that don't eat
cows,
beef, right? I mean,
know.
it could
Who
be,
knows?
right? It could.
But let me ask you this, Ryan. So let's say the Alyssa Milano thing, right? Does that go to committee? Like, how does that, okay, here's her post pops up. Does it come to a specific person's desk first? And you say, I don't know that this should stay up. And then you forward it up to somebody. Like, how does that whole process work?
Yeah. So we do get audited, but like basically you get one piece of content, I guess you could call it, or a job on your screen. So I click next or whatever, and I say, I get a job on my screen that says, hey, Tommy's calling Susie a liar, or, says, Susie, you're a liar. And so this was reported by Tommy. So I choose to either delete that completely or ignore it, allow it on the platform. Yeah, but as far as a recourse, so I do get audited. So let's say I do 200 jobs a day, 1,000 jobs a week. I'll get audited on about 50 of those a week. And then I can, explain my rationale if the QA person agreed with me or disagreed with me. But as far as the decision making and the recourse, so I always have the policy open. They call it the implementation standards. So I look under the section that it applies to. So if it's the hate speech policy, I open up the hate speech policy, and I read to see if that applies to that particular situation. But if there are edge cases, or if it's kind of a gray area, we do reach out to Facebook for guidance, or if something's very, very trending. So for example, this past fall, we had #Boogaloo that was trending. We also had Civil War was trending during the impeachment proceedings, because a lot of people were saying, hey, if you impeach Trump, there's going to be a civil war. So we raise up trends. And if something is very viral, Facebook gives us guidance. They say, yes, delete this, or allow that. So for example, with the Ukraine whistleblower, I think his first name is Eric. We'll leave it at that. I don't know if this is going to be on YouTube, but it will be. We got guys. Yeah. So the Ukraine whistleblower, we got guidance to take down any mention of his name. And I was involved in that process where initially we made a decision at the local level to delete it, and then we got confirmation from Facebook. So yeah, we would always get direction from Facebook about how to handle certain cases.
And it's not like every post that goes up gets in front of somebody's eyes like yours. It's if somebody has complained about it.
Yeah. So the way and that's really interesting because, mainly things get on our queue and I review it if it's been reported. But what's fascinating is Facebook has the ability to inject certain hashtags into our queue. So, for example, something they did do is when Greta Thunberg was trending, people were calling her retarded. And she's a minor, but she's a public figure. So she has some protections, but not as many protections as a private individual. It's, if your 12-year-old niece or nephew was on Facebook, she would have more protections than Greta Thunberg. So this was trending. So Facebook, they proactively injected those violating hashtags, or the violating hashtag retarded, into our queue. So we got a lot more of those types of jobs. So it's not only when someone reports something, it's whenever Facebook wants something prioritized, they can have us review keywords or trending hashtags.
So they could have it like open carry. They could have it like Second Amendment, 2A, like any of those things could be flagged at any moment, right?
Yeah, that's the ability they have with their AI bots that go through and scour the Facebook for certain words. Yeah.
I noticed it on Marketplace here in Arizona. It's legal to buy any kind of slot machine that's out there, but slot machine is a word that they pull for in Marketplace, and people are using different names for slot machines to try to bypass it so they can sell their items that are perfectly legal to sell. So I'm sure that's happening with, it's a keyword things. So.
Do you know of any time that anything that, specifically Second Amendment related, firearm related, has been kind of flagged in that way?
I do know that they created a new section of the policy within regulated goods. So within that policy is firearms. And after, I believe, the New Zealand shooting, or I don't remember which shooting, but after a shooting, they created a new section of the policy dealing with 3D printing. And this is when the 3D printing was trying to gaining some steam. And so they prohibited any sharing of 3D printing designs on Facebook, which is not, and that's the thing. A lot of these rules they create are not a violation of the law. For going back to hate speech, none of that's a violation of the law. And firearms, I believe in Arizona, you can sell a firearm person to person, but Facebook's policy goes beyond that, and they have their own arbitrary policy. So yeah, 3D printing is prevented. And generally, if you're brick and mortar, you can share things, or you can sell firearms. But yeah, it seemed like if there's a large event, they would capitalize on that in order to create a new policy that would further limit types of transactions.
Absolutely. That is so interesting. So one of the other things that you found to be almost impossible to discuss, and you kind of already touched on it a little bit, is anything having to do with immigration, whether it's, legal immigration, whether it's illegal immigration. And so talk to us about that struggle, and why do you think it's such a difficult topic?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best examples of political speech that was censored, because immigration is one of the biggest topics, and it has been for the last 4 years, or any longer than that. So I would often see posts from Facebook saying, "Hey, Trump just gave a speech about immigration," and they would say, "Be on the lookout for hate speech related to his statements." So they wouldn't necessarily tell us to delete those people, but we would be, looking out for hate speech statements, and they'd use Trump's speech as a reference point. Hey, this is the kind of stuff to look for, anything talking about immigrants. And the other thing to know is the policy continuously changes. Like every 2 weeks, they can tweak the policy. So with immigration, they've made it a little more nuanced. So if you're referencing a specific event, like if you say, an illegal immigrant killed Kate Steinle, sometimes that is allowed now. But for over the course of 2 years, there were many, many statements where they would call out Trump, even his State of the Union speech. They referenced his State of the Union speech, and they said there may be some racist or something violating in his State of the Union speech. So essentially, they're playing along with the media that characterizes anything related to Trump as racist and hate speech.
Wow. What do you think the reverberating effects of this might be? Because if we don't know what we're not seeing, that hides something from us that might help factor into our worldview, our decision making. But it's not like they're purposely putting other stuff in front of us. It's just the only thing left is what they haven't pulled off. But how do you see this playing out a generation from now, 2 generations from now?
Yeah, long term, the effects are very immense. So if you look at Facebook and Google, Facebook alone has 3 billion active users. So this is basically controlling the flow of information, controlling the discourse. Just two quick examples. I mean, Antifa is still not classified as like a criminal organization or a hate org. Under Facebook's policy, I mean, we would take down posts from, cartels, obviously, MS-13. Other people were classified as hate speech figures like Tommy Robinson and Gavin McInnes. So they target people on one side of the spectrum, but other people are allowed to operate. So Antifa is not a hate org. The other thing I was going to mention was they changed the wording, so they allow more attacks on cops. So before, if you have like an image of a cop, right, and the comment below, let's say there's a cop arresting someone, you can see the cop's face, and the comment below says that cop is a pig. They changed the policy to allow that attack on that private individual who's the cop. So the only way that would get taken down is if the cop in the image actually found that post and reported it himself. So
and each incident of the post, right? Like, because it could have been shared and put up a bunch by a 1,000 different people, and he'd have to complain about all 1,000 probably. Yeah,
he'd have to report it 1,000 times to get it taken down each time. So those are just indicators of the way that they're controlling the narrative, they're controlling the discourse and favoring the left. So yeah, long term, there's a lot of problems. I mean, Matt Gaetz, as a result of the investigation that Project Veritas and I did, it launched an antitrust probe with big tech. So there might be some ways legislatively to deal with this blatant abuse that we're witnessing. And it's funny because a lot of people on Twitter and YouTube that saw my video, they said, hey, we knew this was happening. We just didn't know. We didn't have the evidence. Well, now we have the evidence. So where do we go from here?
That is huge. And as a conservative person, the idea of more government oversight and government involvement goes completely against just the fiber of my being. Mm-hmm. But I can see how it does seem like something maybe should be, some guidelines or something should be done. Now, it's still a free market, so far. And so, if I'm Facebook, I could say, all right, you don't like our rules, go use whatever at Parler, or I don't know what else is out there. Go use something else. Just like us as business owners. Well, if you don't like something about our business, go to our competitor. What do you say about that? Like, why isn't that just the way that we should handle this?
Yeah, and that's fascinating to think about, because you look at the history of the internet. So the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, whereby Facebook is protected, that legislation was created 20 years ago. This was when the internet was a baby. And part of the purpose of that policy, that law, was to preserve a vibrant and free marketplace on the internet, because they didn't want internet forums to get sued out of existence for being held liable for this every single comment on that website. So here we're in a different landscape, or in a completely different landscape 20 years from now. And, there is some competition on the internet, but when it comes to social media, let's be honest, I think Facebook is looking more like a monopoly every single day. So that's
who else could start that? Who else could even, you'd have to have billions of dollars to do it.
Well, and not even that, but like you're saying, they are benefiting, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, I assume. They're benefiting from the tax breaks and legal protections and whatever else, to be a forum, right? Just a bulletin board, right? Yeah. A digital bulletin board. But as soon as they go in there and they're like, well, I don't like that thing on the bulletin board. Now they're not acting in accordance with what has given them the protections. Is that a fair way to state that?
Yeah, that's very accurate. It's kind of like having a library. If I go into a library and I find something I don't like or it's offensive, can I sue the library? No. Like, the books might be offensive, but that, it's kind of like banning certain books in the library, or controlling the access to certain books. So Facebook's an intermediary, and they're also, in the wording of the law, they're a good Samaritan. So the law provided for them to act as a good Samaritan to block certain things that were very offensive in their forum. But yeah, obviously they're not acting as a good Samaritan now. And to Dan's point, yeah, it's really impossible to compete with them. I feel like Google and YouTube and Facebook, they coordinate and they collude to protect themselves and keep themselves as the biggest fish in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Well, so Project Veritas, you said there's already videos up about the work you did with your hidden camera. Are there more videos to come, or is it kind of like what you have done is already out there for the world to see?
Yeah. So as far as I know, there won't be any. The video is out and it has a lot of what I documented. I don't know that there will be any more videos. I know that I did record a lot of content and material that was not in the video release. So I've talked about some of that. I'm not able to share additional screenshots unless I get approval from Project Veritas. There's a lot there. There's a lot that I documented. I was there. I filmed with a hidden camera for many months. And so I know there's some other videos coming out with Project Veritas related to election fraud. But yeah, it was quite an experience to be able to film undercover for a couple months. And there's definitely a lot there. So
So Ryan, with this Project Veritas, is there a goal for them to try to get some changes made, or they just put it out in public and that's it? Or are they going to fight Facebook with this?
One of their key goals is to affect change. So shortly before the video got released, I was in communication with Congressman Matt Gaetz's office in Florida, and I shared a lot of material with them that was not in the video release, not in the public domain. So they have access to that. Now, I think them moving and launching an antitrust probe is one of the effects and impacts that Project Veritas wanted. I think the American public wants that. They want more transparency from Facebook. Did Mark Zuckerberg? The question is, did Mark Zuckerberg lie in 2018 when he said they don't censor political speech? How is Facebook going to be held accountable? Because we've seen them getting fined in the EU, for example, in Europe for $5 billion, which to them is chump change. Right. So how do we affect that change? How do we hold them accountable?
Well, the other thing, you did make a change, excuse me, with Facebook. Now everybody that goes into for a meeting has to be strip searched. So that's a good thing. Now, yeah. I hope they do something. I don't like government control either, but when you take a public forum and you make it public and you don't allow all the content to be on there, then it's no longer a public forum, it's a company. And all companies are regulated, whether we like it or not, Yeah. So I'm really glad you did this. Thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah.
So you weren't fired because of this, right? But you now clearly can't go back to that job again, and it could impact your future job interviews as people see these kinds of interviews that you've done and that sort of thing. So, you still got to feed the family. So you've put up a GoFundMe account. So people who value the measures you took, you really kind of stuck your neck out. Easy for me to say. And so if people want to, support that and reward that kind of work, then you have a GoFundMe. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I did set up a GoFundMe about 3.5 weeks ago. So if there's any way you can help out, I'm currently unemployed and just trying to, I've done in the last 3 weeks, to give you an idea, I've done over 20 interviews. So I've interviewed with Mark Dice, with InfoWars, pretty much anybody who reaches out to me, I'll interview with them. So just trying to spread the word. Get the message out, because this is not being covered by the mainstream media. Compared to a counterexample would be, Cambridge Analytica. So that was kind of a big scandal associated with Facebook. But yeah, it's important for me to interview and get the word out. So anything you can do to help me out on the GoFundMe, it's just gofundme.com/Facebook Insider. And I'm also on Twitter as well if you want to reach out to me at Real Ryan Hartwig. But yeah, any help would be greatly appreciated. But also, if you work in big tech, if you're an insider with one of the big tech companies, reach out to Project Veritas. Their email is veritastips@protonmail.com. And they'd love to hear from you if you have anything on the inside at big tech.
So you're not getting any media coverage for this, other than, I mean, not the big guys?
Yeah, I mean, I was, Breitbart obviously did an article. There's been quite a few smaller publications, but yeah, nothing about CNN. I actually posted about CNN yesterday because Don Lemon, and this is really fascinating. So Don Lemon was given an exception because he said on air, white males are terror threats. And Facebook specifically gave us guidance to allow that despite it violating their hate speech policy, because they're implying that violated the hate speech policy for, implying that white males are terrorists. So it's just an example. Yeah. So CNN has not given me any coverage, no mention at all. Radio silence. Yeah.
I'm surprised that Fox or One wouldn't put you on.
OAN, One
Yeah.
American News
I'm
Network.
working with One American News. We might have another kind of side story. They should be pretty big coming out. And I did talk to One American News, and then, yeah, so there's some bigger ones that I'm working with, and Newsmax as well. There should be a story coming out with Newsmax.
Yeah, if you can't get that, you can always put it on Facebook.
Well, this is going to be shared on Facebook, so we'll see what happens there. So this is really good information. It's hard to be the one that steps out from the pack. So I always admire people who have taken that on themselves. How do people see the video? How do people continue to follow you?
Yeah, so you can watch the video if you just search Project Veritas on YouTube, you can find the video. And also, if you go to my blog, ryanhartwig.org, it has links to the video and also links to all my recent media appearances. So yeah, and I'm on Twitter and Gab and Parler. I think the hashtag, it's at Real Ryan Hartwig on all of those. So yeah, feel free to follow me. I'm on Facebook as well. If you search Ryan Hartwig, you should be able to find me. And I'm a local here. I grew up in Mesa, and I've actually been to your gun store in Avondale and purchased a firearm from you guys a couple years ago. So.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And this is our show goes out because it's on the internet. It's actually worldwide. So, we've got an audience all over the place. So you could be encouraging people, even in other countries right now, to not just kind of go along to get along, but when you see something wrong, try to take some measures to correct it, or at least shine a light on it. So.
Yeah. And remember that 5 million's a pocket change to Facebook. Put a B in front of it, 5 billion. Now maybe they'll look at that, right?
Their fines. Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
So, all right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ryan Hartwig. We really appreciate you. We'll check back in and see what's the latest and greatest in a little while from now. Okay.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. That was interesting. He took a lot of risks with that. Can you imagine going to your office meeting with a camera?
No.
But could you? But let's look at this. Could you imagine?
It'd be a nervous wreck, I think.
Could you imagine working at a company that everything that you stand for is being tossed?
Yeah.
That.
I mean, I think there is a line when anybody can get pushed across that line. But, the other thing I'm thinking about is, we walk around with listening devices.
Right.
All the time. So, we can say something casually in conversation about, I was thinking about taking a vacation to Aruba, right? I guarantee you the next time I go on my Facebook or whatever, there's going to be ads popping up for like travel to Aruba.
Let's try it.
So
I don't like Hillary Clinton. No. Did I say that?
Gosh.
Did I say that?
I think you said that.
It was just a test thing. It was a test
But
thing.
so anyway, we walk around. There are cameras on Ring doorbells. There are cameras on businesses that are catching us just strolling down the street. Some of them have audio, some of them don't. So, privacy is a completely different thing in the year
It
2020
started with those dang elevators.
I'm telling you.
Hey, let's put a camera in an elevator. Oh, we've got them in elevators now. Hey, let's put a camera in the hallway. Oh, let's put a camera on your phone. Let's put a camera and a voice recording on your phone.
Well, I was sure that they had cameras in elevators way before anybody ever told me they did.
Before they had elevators.
And so Danny was like, "You're paranoid, don't worry about it. You're paranoid." And
What could we possibly be thinking about if you said that in an elevator show?
Because he's trying to make out with me in an elevator. That's what it's about. Okay,
They didn't have elevators back then. It was crank kind.
The crank kind of, with the elevator operator.
Yeah.
And the steel door clank. So yeah, I'm like, don't be trying to flirt with me in the elevator.
Seriously.
There's cameras. And he's like, no, there's not. And then pretty soon after that, we saw on the news that some I don't know, was a
seriously, you have to think about
crime or something that was captured.
Somebody that asked Facebook, I don't care what they do about guns. I don't like guns. I don't care what they do. And then next it's slot machines. And then next it might be because of you like ice cream, or, you never know what they could start, banning.
Yeah, they've really stood President Trump up as kind of the, whatever he says, it's totally okay to just
right.
vomit awful, hate on the thing that he is supporting, right, or himself. And once you get in that mindset, it's real easy to shift you from, okay, well, now it's, maybe your neighbor who owns guns, or maybe now it's your neighbor who won't wear a mask. Oh my gosh, what an evil human being you are if you don't wear a mask. And they just create this division and this dissension, and where we can't even speak to each other anymore. And we've got to fight that in every way we can. We've got to remember that we're human beings, flesh and blood. We have more in common than we will ever have not in common, and really capitalize on those things, because the news source people who are dollar driven and the politicians who are dollar driven, donation driven, it is in their benefit for us to not be able to speak to each other, because then we look to them
right.
to tell us, media, who do I hate today? Tell us, media, what am I supposed to think about what my neighbor's doing? And then the politician goes, don't like what your neighbor's doing? Donate to me and I will stop them, right? It's horrible.
Don't like what your neighbor's doing? Call 1-800 I don't give up. No, I didn't say that.
No, how about you go and you talk to your neighbor
right.
and you learn more about them. Once you learn more about them, you might actually understand, oh, now I see why you do that. Or you might say, you know what, I don't agree with you, but it doesn't really affect me. So you do you, I'll do me.
Well, the cool thing is,
way to live.
I don't know what my neighbor does and I don't care.
What?
I don't care what my neighbor does.
That's okay to live that
way? As
way?
long as he's not doing it outside in front of me, why would I care?
And even if he is, if he's not harming you,
right.
Your rights end where someone else's begin. Period. End of story. We need to start living that way again. And we also need to wrap up.
Rights on, brother.
Rights
on. Hey, who was that unmasked man?
That unmasked man?
Remember the cartoon? Who was that masked man?
Yeah.
Now it's going to be, who was that unmasked man?
Call the snitch line. No, that's gross. Snitch. Don't do that. Don't do that. That is not okay.
No, it's not okay.
All right.
If it doesn't affect you, leave it alone.
That's right. You know what, though? If you do, that is your decision. I don't have to respect it. But if you do, that is your decision.
I
can't tell them they can't call a snitch line. I'm just undoing what I just said.
Well, no, but it affects you. Because they're going to snitch on you.
Calling on me there.
Yeah.
But
you know what? I would like to thank Ryan Hartwig for coming to the show today and being on, because, again, we learned so much from all of our guests. And it's neat to see that he was on the inside of Facebook. So, Ryan, thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you to our awesome listeners who share this message and discuss it around within their sphere of influence. And even if you are if you've disagreed with every single thing we've said today, I love that. That's awesome.
Right.
Go ahead and
even if you're a snitch and you're not going to snitch no more.
Yeah. I like what you did there. Because now you're thinking about it. You're engaging your brain. you have your own opinion, and maybe you're going to research it a little more. That's beautiful. Do lots of that. But we value your time. We value that you take the time to listen and to share the message with the people in your life. And until next time, what are we praying for, Dan?
The snitches go away.
We're going to pray for our nation.
Oh, and we're going to pray for our leaders.
We are. Our representatives, our elected officials. We're praying for all of them. All of them, Dan.
What are you pointing at me for?
Even the ones you don't like.
Which ones?
You know, the ones, especially.
The rulers.
Especially the ones you don't like.
The rulers.
Be good to each other. Have a great week. And
You going to say goodbye?
I just did.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.